The studio behind Rambo went bankrupt because of a pirate movie. The studio behind The Lord of the Rings went bankrupt because of a kid's fantasy. This happened 20 times, and somehow nobody in Hollywood ever fucking learns. In 1945, three legendary filmmakers started their own studio. Frank Capra, William Wyler, and Samuel Briskin founded Liberty Films, and they had big plans: produce 15 pictures. Their first film was going to be something special. Capra directed It's a Wonderful Life, starring James Stewart as a guy ready to end it all until his guardian angel shows him what life would be like without him. Classic Christmas movie now, right? Everyone loves it, it's on TV every year, but when it came out in 1946, nobody went to see it. Liberty spent $2.3 million making it, which is about $36 million in today's money. The movie made $2 million at the box office. They lost money on their very first film, and that was it for the studio. Liberty Films couldn't handle the loss and faced foreclosure. They had to sell everything to Paramount Pictures. Capra and the other founders took Paramount stock, got jobs there instead, and Liberty shut down after making just one movie. The film got nominated for 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director, but it didn't matter. In 1963, Fox decided to make the biggest epic ever about the Queen of Egypt, with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton leading the cast. This was going to be massive. The budget was supposed to be around $2 million, then it went to $5 million, and then it just kept climbing. Elizabeth Taylor signed on for $1 million, which put her in the same category as Marlon Brando. Nobody else was making that kind of money at the time. She also insisted they film internationally instead of in Hollywood, which added cost for everything. Then the director had to be changed. Then Taylor and Burton started an affair on set that turned into a full-blown scandal and led to a lawsuit. Then there were reshoots. So by the time they finished, Cleopatra had cost $44 million in 1963 money. That's $440 million today, the most expensive film in history at that point. What's funny to me here is that it actually was the highest-grossing film of 1963, but it still bombed. Fox had spent so much making it and marketing it that even being #1 at the box office wasn't enough to save them. They had to sell 300 acres of their Los Angeles backlot just to cover the costs. That land is Century City now. The studio didn't shut down permanently, but Cleopatra nearly destroyed them. It wrecked their finances and their reputation for years. The 60s had a lot of big Hollywood epics like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, and Samuel Bronston Productions wanted in on that action. They made The Fall of the Roman Empire with an incredible cast, including Alec Guinness and Christopher Plummer. The one thing they really needed was Charlton Heston, who was basically required for an epic to work back then. But Heston backed out before production started. Stephen Boyd took the role instead, and they kept going. The film cost $19 million to make, which is about $187 million today. It made just $4.7 million at the box office. Samuel Bronston Productions couldn't survive that kind of loss. The company went bankrupt the same year the film came out in 1964, and then things got worse for Bronston personally. During the bankruptcy proceedings, he was convicted of perjury and had to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court. They eventually sided with him, but by then the damage was done and his studio was gone. Hammer Films made horror movies for decades, starting in the 30s and continuing through the 60s and 70s. But by the 70s, horror was oversaturated with cheap knockoffs everywhere, and Hammer's formula stopped working. They started putting out financial failures one after another, and their last film was The Lady Vanishes in 1979, a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's version from the 30s. Trying to match Hitchcock is already risky and usually doesn't go well. The film starred Elliot Gould and Sybil Shepherd and cost about $20 million in today's dollars to make. The box office numbers aren't even available, which tells you how bad it was. Hammer stopped making movies after that and liquidated the same year. The company technically stayed in existence and got bought and sold over the years, but they didn't make another film until 2008, 29 years later. This was years before James Cameron's Titanic. In 1980, they made a film based on a Clive Cussler novel about recovering the ship to get precious cargo hidden inside. The actual Titanic wreckage hadn't even been discovered yet when this came out. That wouldn't happen for another 5 years. But they made reasonable guesses about what it would look like down there. ITC Entertainment spent $40 million making this thing. They built a 55-foot scale replica of the ship that weighed 10 tons, and that model alone cost $5 million. The tank to hold it cost another $3.3 million. The movie made $7 million at the box office. The replica and the tank cost more than the entire box office haul. The producer Lou Grade said it would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic than raise the Titanic. It was the last in a series of disasters for ITC Films. They had to sell their distribution arm and the rights to their entire library to Universal Pictures. The company kept going for a while, doing mostly television work, but eventually shut down for good in 1998. In 1978, Michael Cimino wins Best Picture and Best Director for The Deer Hunter. He's on top of the world. 2 years later, he makes Heaven's Gate and destroys one of the oldest studios in Hollywood. The movie's about some land dispute in 1890s Wyoming involving immigrants and cattle barons. Cimino got Christopher Walken, John Hurt, Chris Christopherson, Jeff Bridges, serious actors, all of them. The initial budget was $7.5 million. Then shooting started and everything went wrong immediately. Cimino turned into a dictator on set. Endless takes, endless retakes, everything had to be perfect according to his vision. After the first 5 days of filming, they were already 6 days behind schedule. The budget jumped to $11 million, then kept climbing. By the time Cimino finished, Heaven's Gate had cost $44 million. The movie came out and critics hated it. Audiences avoided it completely. It made less than $4 million at the box office. United Artists had been around since the 1920s. Charlie Chaplin was one of the co-founders. It was a legendary independent studio. Heaven's Gate damaged them so badly that they became a subsidiary of MGM. Just like that, United Artists stopped being a standalone company. Cimino went from Oscar winner to the guy who killed a studio in 2 years. Francis Ford Coppola made the Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, one of the greatest directors of his generation. Then in 1982, he decided to make a musical romantic comedy set in Las Vegas. One from the Heart is about a couple that breaks up, finds other people, and gets back together. That's it. But for some reason, budget started at $15 million, which was already a lot for a rom-com in 1982. Coppola bought the rights through his own company, Zoetrope Studios, and financed it himself. He insisted on building expensive miniatures and elaborate sets instead of just filming on location in Vegas. The budget climbed to $25 million. His personal finances were mixed up with the studio's finances, so when the movie bombed, it all came down on him. One from the Heart made $636,000 at the box office. Coppola ended up owing Chase Manhattan Bank and others $30 million. He had to file for bankruptcy. Third time in less than a decade he'd done that. Zoetrope Studios didn't completely die right away, but it lost all the goodwill from Apocalypse Now and The Godfather. The debacle messed up Coppola's finances for over 10 years. Eventually, Zoetrope gave way to his other company, American Zoetrope, in 1990. This one's actually a great movie. It's about the founding of the American space program and the Mercury 7, the first test pilots who went into space in the 1960s. Sam Shepard, Ed Harris, Dennis Quaid, incredible cast. The movie won 4 Academy Awards out of 8 nominations. And it still killed its studio. The Right Stuff cost $27 million to make and earned less than $22 million at the box office. Part of the problem was the runtime, nearly 3 hours long, which scared people away. And it had a lot of competition when it came out. The Ladd Company had produced a bunch of flops before this, and The Right Stuff was the last straw. Warner Brothers had been distributing their films, but after The Right Stuff tanked, Warner dropped them completely. No more distribution deal. The Ladd Company scrambled to find new distributors. They worked with Paramount and Miramax on and off for years, but they never recovered from losing that Warner contract. They limped along with limited releases until 2007 when they finally closed for good. The first Superman movie was huge. Superman 2 was great. Superman 3 was when things started going downhill. Then came The Quest for Peace, and it was a mess. The plot's got Superman throwing all the world's nuclear weapons into the sun, and then Lex Luthor creates an evil solar-powered Superman clone. It's as dumb as it sounds. The Cannon Group was producing it, and they ran into a financial crisis in the middle of production. They'd taken on too many projects at the same time. They were also spending millions on a live-action Masters of the Universe movie that was equally doomed. So Cannon started cutting Superman's budget. Original budget was $30 million, got slashed to $17 million. They had to drop 30 minutes of footage from the film. You can feel it when you watch it. The movie's choppy, doesn't make sense. It made $36 million at the box office, lost money, and Masters of the Universe bombed too. Cannon faced bankruptcy and an SEC investigation. They ended up under MGM. Tried to revive the studio, but it didn't work, and Cannon became defunct in 1994. They've been revived a couple times since under different names, but the original Cannon died. Aurora Productions started in the early 80s with The Secret of NIMH, which was a beloved animated classic. Then they pivoted to live action and made 5 movies in a row that nobody saw. Heart Like a Wheel, Eddie and the Cruisers, and finally, Side Out. That was the one that finished them off. The movie's about a law student who moves to Southern California and ends up competing in a volleyball tournament. They filmed during an actual professional volleyball tournament and cast real pro athletes. That's the most interesting thing about the entire production. Side Out cost $6 million to make. It made $450,000 at the box office. Aurora Productions shut down in 1990, right after the movie came out. The loss was too big to recover from. They'd been bleeding money on flops for years, and Side Out was the final one. The movie got a retro VHS Blu-ray release in 2022, probably just because the distributor TriStar had the rights and figured why not. But Aurora itself has been gone for over 30 years. Coralco Pictures was drowning in debt and they needed a hit. So they decided to make a big pirate adventure movie called Cutthroat Island. This was going to save the company. Michael Douglas was supposed to star with Gina Davis, but he bailed, so Matthew Modine replaced him. They built these massive wooden ships, then had to rebuild them. Budget started at $60 million and just kept climbing until it hit nearly $100 million by the time they wrapped. When the movie came out, it was dead on arrival. The film was so dull it basically killed pirate movies for the next decade. Coralco lost around $150 million on it. The company tried selling everything to Fox for $50 million. Canal Plus outbid them and the deal collapsed. Coralco went bankrupt. Guinness World Records called Cutthroat Island the biggest box office bomb of all time, and it held that title until at least 2012. The movie that was supposed to rescue Coralco sank it completely instead. Don Bluth made best animated movies of the 80s and 90s. Secret of NIMH, Land Before Time, Anastasia. By 2000, he wanted to do something ambitious with his next film. He was going to combine traditional hand-drawn animation with all this new CGI technology and make a sci-fi epic called Titan. Fox Animation was producing it. They'd done Anastasia and Bartok the Magnificent, but this was their biggest project yet. Mixing the old animation methods with cutting-edge computer graphics drove the budget up to $75 million. For an animated film back then, this was a lot. Reviews were mixed when it came out, and at the box office it completely tanked. Made about $37 million against that $75 million budget. Fox killed the animation studio immediately. Here's the weird part though, Fox Animation had been developing this movie about the Ice Age when they got shut down. Some people from Fox took that same concept over to Blue Sky Studios and turned it into the Ice Age franchise, which went on to make billions. So Titan killed Fox Animation and ended Don Bluth's career in theaters, but it accidentally created one of the most successful animated franchises ever. The movie's got a cult following now, but that didn't help the studio in 2000. John Travolta spent the entire 90s trying to get Battlefield Earth made. It's based on a book by Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology. Every major studio turned him down because they didn't want anything to do with Scientology. An independent company called Franchise Pictures finally agreed to make it. Cost $80 million. The movie came out and everybody hated it. Made less than $30 million at the box office. The Razzies gave it the award for worst drama of their first 25 years. But then it got worse. Turns out Franchise Pictures had been lying about the budget to scam their investors. They'd inflated the costs by millions. A lawsuit caught them and they got ordered to pay $77 million to their investors. They didn't have $77 million. The company went under. Travolta still defends the movie though, even after all these years. Hironobu Sakaguchi created Final Fantasy, one of the biggest video game franchises ever. When he announced he was making a computer-animated movie based on it, fans were excited. He wanted to make the first truly photorealistic CGI film. Every character, every detail was going to look completely real. He succeeded technically. The movie looks beautiful, but making it photorealistic cost a fortune. The budget hit $145 million. It became one of the most expensive video game movies ever made. And then it made just $85 million at the box office. Not nearly enough to turn profit. Square and Enix were planning to merge at the time, but after Square lost so much money on The Spirits Within, Enix backed out. They eventually merged in 2003, but Square Pictures didn't survive that long. Before shutting down, the studio finished one last project. A 10-minute segment for The Animatrix. After that was done, they laid off all 125 employees and closed permanently. Space Jam came out in 1996 and made over $230 million. Warner Brothers proved they could mix live action with animation and print money. So in 2003, they tried it again with Looney Tunes back in action. Same budget as Space Jam, $80 million. Same concept, live action mixed with classic Looney Tunes characters. Should have worked. Instead, it made $68 million. The production was a mess. They'd planned to make a Space Jam sequel originally, but it kept changing until the final movie looked nothing like what they'd started with. Nobody cared when it came out. Warner Brothers Feature Animation had multiple projects going. After Back in Action bombed, they canceled everything and shut down the studio in 2004. Warner eventually relaunched as Warner Animation Group and made the Lego Movie and other successful films. They rebooted again in 2023, but that original studio was gone, killed by a Looney Tunes movie. They finally made that Space Jam sequel in 2021. It bombed too. Ted Turner couldn't get anyone to finance his Civil War movie. He wanted to make a prequel to this 1993 film Gettysburg, had the source material lined up, had a director ready to go. But nobody wanted to put up the money. So Turner said, fine, I'll do it myself, and created his own production company. Ted Turner Pictures. $90 million of his own money going into one film. The director handed in his first cut, and it was over 5 hours long. They whittled it down to just under 3.5 hours for theaters, which, if you're keeping track, is still longer than The Godfather. And apparently they thought maybe the problem was they hadn't made it long enough, because they also put together a 280-minute director's cut and a 6-hour miniseries version. The movie came out and made $13 million. Ted Turner Pictures released Gods and Generals, watched it earn back basically nothing, and shut down immediately. Turner had been planning a whole trilogy. This was the middle film. He wanted to make the third one next. After the box office came in, he canceled everything. Right after Lord of the Rings turned into this massive phenomenon, New Line started looking for their next fantasy franchise. They found Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy and figured they had another billion-dollar series on their hands. This was the mid-2000s and fantasy was making insane money. New Line put $180 million into the Golden Compass and felt pretty good about it. Except Pullman's books have this whole anti-organized religion thing running through them, and some groups started calling it anti-Catholic before the movie even came out. The studio tried to sand down those edges in the adaptation, but the controversy stuck around anyway. Narnia had just pulled in huge numbers partly because Christian audiences showed up for the religious themes. The Golden Compass had the opposite problem. Those audiences stayed away because of the controversy, and the movie cut out the very stuff that might have made it interesting to everyone else. It made $372 million worldwide, which sounds okay. But in reality, New Line needed Lord of the Rings numbers to justify building a franchise. They needed a massive hit. What they got was a disappointment. New Line had been around since the 70s as an independent studio. After the Golden Compass, they restructured and sold everything to Warner Brothers. The name stuck around for a while, but New Line as an actual company was finished. The Pang brothers had made this Thai film in 1999, did fine with it, and decided to remake it in 2008 with Nicolas Cage. It cost $45 million to make. Virtual Studios came on to work on it. They'd done VFX for V for Vendetta, for 300, some solid projects. Bangkok Dangerous seemed like another job. The movie made $42 million worldwide and got absolutely destroyed by critics. They went after every part of it. The action sequences didn't work, Cage's performance was off, the direction was flat, the editing was choppy, it got demolished. Less than a year later, Virtual Studios shut down. Bangkok Dangerous was their final credit. A Nicolas Cage action flop that barely lost money ended a VFX house that had worked on some genuinely good films. Fox Atomic was making cheap genre movies and comedies for teenagers. They'd had some wins with horror sequels like 28 Weeks Later, they were doing okay. In 2008, they made The Rocker. Rainn Wilson plays a washed-up drummer who gets a second chance touring with his nephew's band. The cast was actually pretty good. Christina Applegate, Josh Gad, Emma Stone right before she blew up. And it was cheap, only $15 million to produce. The movie made $8.8 million at the box office. Didn't even crack half the budget. Fox Atomic released its last two films in 2009 and closed the division. Everything still in production got kicked back to the parent company. A low-budget comedy that underperformed by $6 million was enough to end the whole thing. They'd survived bigger losses, but apparently The Rocker was the final straw. Robert Zemeckis spent years pushing motion capture animation. That's the technology behind Polar Express and Beowulf. You know, the one where all the characters look almost human but not quite, and it ends up feeling creepy. Zemeckis had his own studio for this, Image Movers Digital, backed by Disney. In 2011, they put out Mars Needs Moms. Between production and marketing, it cost $175 million. It made $39 million at the box office. Disney didn't even wait to see how it performed. They shut down Image Movers Digital after production wrapped, but before the film hit theaters. Over the course of a year, they phased out 450 employees as a cost-cutting measure. The studio that Zemeckis built to pioneer motion capture animation didn't survive long enough to see its own final film in theaters. The closure also killed Zemeckis' planned 3D adaptation of Yellow Submarine. The whole experiment just ended, and Disney walked away from it before the bomb even officially dropped.